Good morning. Yesterday I shared with you the little bit of devotional footage I took while out there running that race on Saturday. I want to confess, when I was doing it, I was so sure that my voice was just even and I wasn't breathing that hard and I was going to be understandable. And then I got home and I could hear how hard I was huffing and puffing. It was a bit of a shock to me to hear how hard it sounded like that I was working when I didn't think I was at that time. But that got me to thinking about a number of different passages in the Bible where we are encouraged to run a race, and where the race of life or the race of faith is portrayed as a race, and what we are doing is portrayed as a race. And that is in one of the most famous times or familiar passages is when Paul is writing to Timothy. And in 1 Timothy 4, the first 8 verses, Paul kind of sets up the fact that he is coming to the end of his race. And so for the rest of this week, I want us to consider 2 Timothy 4, 1 through 8, and how it connects with running, but much, much more importantly, how it connects with our life of faith. But Paul writes to Timothy saying, "In the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who is to judge the living and the dead, and in view of his appearing and his kingdom, I solemnly urge you, proclaim the message. Be persistent, whether the time is favorable or unfavorable. Convince, rebuke, and encourage with the utmost patience in teaching. For the time is coming when people will not put up with sound doctrine, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own desires, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander away to myths. As for you, always be sober, endure suffering, do the work of an evangelist, carry out your ministry fully. As for me, I'm already being poured out as a libation, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. From now on, there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing." Now, I think those first 5 verses where he's giving us specific instructions are actually setting us up for the final 2 or 3, where he's saying, here is the way you finish the race, here's the way you run the race and finish the race well. I want to focus today on him saying that we are to proclaim the message and be persistent, whether the time is favorable or unfavorable. I have not been a runner for all of my life, really only for the last dozen years or so, but all of that has been long distance running. Marathons, I've done one marathon and a bunch of half marathons, and of course ride and tie events, which are usually 25 or 30 miles. I have done a couple of 50-mile ride and ties, and so they are long distance runs. And one of the absolute rules in all long distance runs is to be persistent, but that doesn't mean, of course, to sprint the whole way. Nobody can sprint for 12 or 13 or 15 or however many miles that you may have to go. You have to be persistent and dogged and just continue to kind of push yourself along to be able to complete the race. But I love it that Paul says, be persistent whether the time is favorable or unfavorable. Because the kind of races that I do are on trails that's not usually on the road. And so the terrain is going to change tremendously, as you may have noticed in that video from yesterday. And sometimes it's horribly steep and rocky, and you can't even run. And as a matter of fact, we kind of tease in Ride and Tie and say that in Ride and Tie, it's always fair to walk the hills, and most of us walk hills. We try to walk them as fast as we can, but rather than just wearing yourself out trying to get up a hill, you walk the hill, and then when you get to the top, you can run down the other side if it goes down the other side and kind of make up for some of the time that maybe you lost going up the hill. And that's what I hear Paul telling us in our faith lives. There are going to be times in our lives that are favorable and times that are unfavorable. And there's going to be times that we're going to be able to run and just run like the wind, and that's wonderful. But there's going to be other times that we're only going to be able to walk, and that's all right too, as long as we are being persistent. And being persistent means trying to be faithful regardless of whether it is a favorable or an unfavorable time. in so many ways in our world right now, this is an unfavorable time. I don't mind confessing to you that the COVID-19 era for me has been draining, and it has been hard, and I don't like it. And there's been lots of times when I felt like I was just walking rather than doing the running that I usually can do. And it's taken more energy, it seems, to do things sometimes. And I have had to learn new ways of doing things, just like recording devotionals and producing those and all those kinds of things. And yet I want to continue to persist whether the time is favorable or unfavorable. It's easy, I think, during these unfavorable times to get short with each other, to be unpleasant with each other, to let our frustrations be taken out sometimes on those people that we love the most. And Paul is telling us here, no, remember, you are always proclaiming the message. And so as you go about today, I want you to think about something. Everybody you encounter today, whether it's on Zoom or on the telephone or in a store or wherever it might be, everybody you encounter, when you leave them, they will either be a little closer to God or a little further away from God than they were when they met you. You can, with encouragement and persistent love, help them come a little closer, or you can, with a harsh word or an impatient tone, pull them a little farther away. So on this day, let us be persistent, whether the day is favorable or unfavorable, so that we can run our race with faith. And we can run our race with faith because God is with us. Amen.